Hi, and welcome to House Blend on SCVTV. I'm Stephen K. Peeples, your host. Thanks for dropping in. I'm really pleased to welcome a very special guest to the show. He's a folk musician turned famous rock photographer. Now, you've seen his work on the covers of classic gazillion-selling albums by The Doors, Crosby, Stills and Nash, and Young, Jackson Browne, Eagles, and James Taylor, just for starters. You may recognize his name from the hundreds of album credits that his name has been on. Henry Diltz. Thanks for joining us, Henry.
Thank you, Stephen. Good to be here.
All right.
Hey.
At long last.
Yeah, really.
All right. Now, Henry was also the Monterey Pop Festival photographer. He shot The Who, Jimi Hendrix, and various other artists there. And he was the official still photographer at Woodstock 2 years later. Now, thousands of memorable images later, Henry now co-owns the Morrison Hotel Fine Art Music Photo Galleries in New York and LA. We'll hear all about that and more. But first, Henry, I got to find out how you made the transition from modern folk quartet banjo player to photographer.
Well, by accident. Yes, our final tour as a modern folk quartet, after we put it aside for 10 years, was going all the way across the country in a house camper, a motorhome. And one day we stopped at a little secondhand store in Michigan. We all ran in, and there was a table just like this full of little secondhand cameras, and one of the guys grabbed one, and so, yeah, we each grabbed one. Hey, I'll have one too. And then we had a little photo freak out the rest of the tour. When we got back to LA, we developed the film, and it was slide film, something I hadn't even realized I didn't know from film. And we got it developed and had a big slideshow, and I thought, man, this is fun. I got to take more of these so we can have more of these slideshows. So it was entirely slide, driven. I just wanted to do more slideshows. That was all.
Well, so how did you hook up with Spoonful and start Love and Spoonful and start shooting for them?
Well, I had spent part of 64, 65 living in Greenwich Village with a guy named Eric Jacobson. We shared an apartment, and he was a banjo player in a folk group. And he became a record producer and started producing the Love and Spoonful. And he said, Henry, I hear you want to be a photographer. Why don't you come back and spend the summer with the guys, 67. I got my camera in 66. So 67, he said, why don't you come back, spend the summer. You'll take pictures of everything. We need a ton of photos, and then you'll learn how to be a photographer. I said, I'll do it.
And there we are.
Yes.
Such as it is.
Yes.
But you got to start somewhere,
my
right?
first album cover, and this was put together by some art director that I never met at Kama Sutra. And he just took a whole ton of photos I took in concert and put them all together in his own way. There it was, though. Yeah.
And the next big one was the Hollies, right?
Right.
The Graham Nash came over and Cass introduced you. Tell us that story.
Yeah, well, one day hanging out at Zal Yanovsky's house, the phone rang and Mama Cass Elliott said, you guys going to be there for a while? I want to bring some friends by. And she brought the Hollies by. These guys had never met each other. We spent the day drinking margaritas, and then Graham said to me, well, hey, you're a photographer? We need some new photos. How about tomorrow afternoon? So we went and did it, and that turned out to be my second album cover.
And that was kind of weird because it was infrared, right?
I had a roll of infrared that
There it is right there.
Yeah. I just happened to have that guy's hat that's red was actually navy blue. The infrared changes colors, you know?
Right.
And I just happened to have one roll and just did it as an experiment, and they liked the way it looked. It looked a little different, you know?
Oh, that's very cool. So that was your introduction to Cass and Graham.
Right.
So we'll get to what happened after that in just a minute.
All right.
We'll be back with Henry Diltz on House Blend right after this short break. All right, we're back on House Blend with Henry Diltz, the rock photographer extraordinaire. And we were talking about the Hollies, and you did an album cover for them. And shortly after that, Graham Nash left the Hollies. And he joined with Stephen Stills and David Crosby. And so how did you come to shoot their debut album cover?
Well, we were all
talk while I display.
Yes, okay. Well, we were all, I was friends with these guys because I was a musician. I met Stephen when I was singing in a folk group, and David as well, actually. And so I knew these guys for a number of years. And when they got together, everyone was very excited about the blend and everything, and they needed publicity pictures. So one day we went around in a car around West Hollywood, just shooting snapshots, and Graham said, I remember with this funky little house. Why don't we, try that place? And there was a couch there. They jumped on the couch. We took the pictures. They hadn't named themselves yet. They didn't know what order the names would be. So we took this picture, and then they liked it a lot, and they thought, gee, that could be a good album cover, but we're backwards. That's Nash, Stills, and Crosby. And then they decided on Crosby, Stills, Nash. So I said, hey, no problem. We'll go back. A couple days later, we'll go back, and it'll take 2 minutes. You'll jump on the couch, snap, snap. We went back, and there was no house. The house was gone, and the couch. The whole thing was an empty lot. So they were forced to put themselves backwards.
Timing is everything.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, who is this guy in
Well,
in
this
the
guy
window?
wasn't actually standing there. We photographed him later in David Crosby's kitchen door and stripped it in there. That's Dallas Taylor, the drummer. Yeah.
Yeah.
He kind of became a part of the group shortly after we took the picture, and they wanted to have him a presence, on the cover. So.
Stills played pretty much everything else.
Right,
He
he
did
did,
the
yeah.
bass and keyboards and everything else. So yeah, they did.
He
need a
played
drummer.
almost all the music on that album, right?
And then you guys went to Big Bear to shoot this.
That's right. Stephen had bought fur coats for each of them.
And you have some Super 8 film of that.
I do, yeah.
It's a great scene where Graham apparently backed into a cactus or something.
He
and
fell
ripped his
down
hand.
and fell into a bush and ripped his velvet trousers, right on his butt, And so we got the first aid kit or something from the limo. We had a limo. We drove up to Big Bear.
Right.
And Joni got the needle and thread and was sewing his pants up, He was bending over. She was sewing.
Sticking a Band-Aid on his bum.
Yeah, that's right.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, so we had a good time doing that.
Well, you were living in Laurel Canyon in this period, like right in the thick of it, on Wonderland, right?
No, Lookout Mountain.
On Lookout, right, okay.
Lookout Mountain.
But all of this was happening all around you, and so the whole scene was quite memorable. What else do you remember from those days?
Well, Laurel Canyon was, it was 5 minutes from Hollywood, and you were in the country, and there were, raccoons and possums and coyotes at night, and you could hear music wafting across the valley, and there were girls with flowers in their hair, and, it was just a nice little sort of mountain community, and a lot of musicians lived there. Very nice.
It was the era.
Yes,
Now,
it was.
Another artist that is an iconic album cover that you created is for James Taylor.
Sweet Baby James,
Sweet Baby James. Now, how did you meet him? And
well, a lot of these covers.
This session.
A lot of these covers are accidental because this was too. His manager, Peter Asher, called me up and said, I got this young guy, James Taylor, he needs some black and white photos. Would you come and shoot some? And we shot at Peter's house, and I said, we need to get outdoors. So I went to a place called The Farm where they had little barns and things. And he looked so good in that blue shirt that I said, just wait a minute, let me get my color camera so I can have one for a slideshow. They only wanted black and white, but I wanted to take a few color shots so I could project them for my friends. And the art director saw it and used it for the cover.
That's the one.
But what I really liked even better was the one inside. Here it is.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, of course, it's cropped a lot, but that was
The black and white shot.
the black and white shot,
I
right?
have to tell you, I met my wife at Capitol Records. She had a little Volkswagen, and she had that photo on the dashboard. She called her Volkswagen Sweet Baby James.
Great. Yes,
So
that's great.
It's very, very exciting. Now, we got to talk about Woodstock.
Okay.
Official Woodstock photographer. Now, how did that come about?
Sitting in my kitchen in Laurel Canyon, the phone rings. It's Chip Monk calling from New York. He said, Henry, we're having a big festival out here in a few weeks. You ought to be here. I said, well, I don't know anybody involved. He said, I'll talk to the producer. And the next day, Michael Lang called. Said, Chip says we need you. So I'm sending you a ticket and $500. I bought film with it and flew out there. So I was there 2 weeks before the festival, and I spent those 2 weeks filming the building of the stage and setting up the grounds and the hog farm, setting up the campgrounds, swimming naked in the lake, and just great, idyllic upstate New York. It was like a summer camp.
Well, one of your early shots from when you got there is a great shot from way back in the field of the stage as it was being constructed.
Right.
No people.
Right.
And then you went to the same spot when the concert was happening,
Right.
and it was just wall-to-wall people. In fact, there's the shot.
Right, yeah.
And you can see the stage way the heck down
Yeah.
there.
Well, you know, at first it was just a big green hillside. It was like alfalfa blowing in the wind, totally green.
Right.
And when and the stage was like a big wooden aircraft carrier, you know, and there were hippie carpenters hammering and sawing and putting boards, and it was just like a big aircraft carrier, and the waves were this green alfalfa blowing. And then one day, a couple days before the festival, there was about 20 people sitting up in the middle of the alfalfa. I said, what are they doing, you know? Oh, yeah, God, it's going to be a concert. I forgot, you know, because it was like summer camp.
Yeah, you got so used to it being out in the sticks and
That's right.
nobody
And the
around.
next day, there were a couple thousand people, and the next day, there were a couple 100,000 people. And then at the end, of course, that whole hillside was just mud.
Yeah.
Covered with mud and soggy tents and sleeping bags and blankets.
Well, let's talk about the performances in just a moment. We'll be back with Henry Diltz on House Blend. I'm Stephen K. Peeples, your host. We'll be back right after this break.